Hello Internet, and welcome to the first episode of Penelope Draws Manga. Today, as I'm sure you saw by the title, I'm going to be drawing my favorite Spider-Man. I was really excited after seeing No Way Home, like a lot of Marvel fans, and I just couldn't get it out of my head. I really just wanted to draw Spider-Man, so here we are. So, in order to draw the proportions of Spider-Man's face mask thing correctly, I have a little reference picture of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in the upper left-hand corner. He's my favorite Spider-Man, probably because he was the first Spider-Man I ever watched. I only first started watching Marvel movies and Spider-Man movies about 2 years ago, starting with Black Panther actually. But I watched my first Spider-Man movie when I was sick, and it was Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. So I finished the sketching phase now, and now I'm moving on to the line art. This whole line art process just made me really wonder why Marvel decided to keep going with the web design over his entire body. It took me so long to do, and it was kind of tedious drawing each line over and over again. But it does look really cool, so there's that. Actually, this whole line art process would have taken me a lot longer to do if I had used a smooth brush instead of a pencil tool. I often like to use the pencil tool because it's much softer and more forgiving, and I think it gives the picture a much more organic feeling overall. So now I'm lining in his hand, and I have the powers of retrospect here, and I realize that I actually put his hand in the wrong position. I put his thumb on top of his fingers like he's at a rock concert or something. I just think it's kind of funny now. Well, anyway, now we're moving on to the coloring process. I don't really have a whole lot to say here, other than it went smoothly and he looks much more like Spider-Man, I guess. And yeah, I guess let's move on to the shading now. So it was about this time that my brother gave me the idea to actually have him hanging upside down. Originally, I was just going to have him standing up with the city in the background, but my brother thought that was boring, and he suggested that I actually have him hanging upside down under a bridge, and I thought that was a way more interesting idea. Unfortunately, this did make the lighting situation a little bit more difficult. That's why I drew a little face on over top of his mask, so that I could better understand the planes of the face that I was shading. And really, I think it's super funny looking. He looks so bored, even though he's Spider-Man. So for this picture, I decided to use soft shading. I don't always use soft shading, but for some reason it just felt right this time. I'm thinking it might be because the light itself is actually softer since I'm going to have him under a bridge. Other than that one bit of light that's hitting his face and his hand, everything else is mostly in shadow. So this is where I realized that I had been shading his face as though the light were coming at it from above. So I refilled the areas where I had previously erased and started again. Well, I wanted to add a musical montage right here, but this is only my first video, and I can't figure out how to do that. Every time I tried to change it, I couldn't figure it out, so here we are. I guess I could tell you about why I hadn't seen Spider-Man until only 2 years ago. I'd actually wanted to watch them for a pretty long time before I actually ended up doing it. My family has them on DVD, so they were just sitting there, waiting for somebody to watch them. But I have younger siblings, and they were always scared of basically anything with plot, and we only have one TV in our house, so it was kind of hard for me to watch it when all of them were always around. So one time I got sick with strep throat, and nobody wanted to come around me, so I was just kind of in my room. And my mom brought up the TV to my room and set it up so that I could watch Spider-Man without anybody else. It was so fun. I watched all 3 of them like in 2 days. Well, anyway, you might have noticed that I have a background in place now. I didn't show making it because it didn't take very long, and really I didn't think it was all that interesting, but if you guys ever want to see me do a background sometime, I can definitely add that in. Like I mentioned earlier, this background is basically just a bridge that Spider-Man can hang under. I didn't reference any bridges while I was drawing it, so I don't really know how accurate it is. I gave it some oxidated beams for some visual interest. I also added a tiny New York in the way background because the background was looking a little bit bare and I thought it could stand some visual interest. I'm glad I added it. It adds a lot of depth to the picture. So here I'm drawing the web that Spider-Man is shooting. Initially, I wanted to have a big web covering the whole picture, but my brother told me it was really distracting, so I settled for this smaller web. I didn't draw any lines on this and instead just kind of painted it in a little bit sketchy, maybe because it's coming at us kind of fast, so it doesn't need any lines to show where it is because it's moving. The process wasn't super complicated. I just sometimes changed the brush size and the brush color and then scribbled in little highlights and lowlights. Then, to push the depth of the web even further, I added a shadow right in the middle and some highlights on the edges. I turned down the opacity of the highlight because it was looking a little bright. And that looks like about good for now. Let's start working on the background. The skyline was looking a little too stylized, so I decided to change the color of some of the buildings. Buildings in real life aren't all the same color, so I don't know why these ones in the background should be either. So now I'm adding some bounce light to the back. This is adding more contrast and makes it feel like he's actually in a space. Light bounces off of everything and lights up parts that would normally be in shadow. And the picture is finished. I added a bit more shading off camera and some dust particles floating in the atmosphere. Just needed a little bit more texture, which I think the dust added nicely. While I'm not 100% pleased with how this picture turned out, it was a lot of fun to make, as was this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it, and I hope you'll stay tuned for my next video, which will be about making character design sheets. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye!